All right, we're official. The
Yeah,
first Polarity podcast, episode 1,
welcome.
ground zero.
Yeah,
So
my name's Hristiyan
my name's
Atanasov.
Gregory Kellet, and we are here to talk about polarity between the masculine and feminine in relationships and to investigate what that's all about. How do we maintain it? How does it erode? What is it? And we're starting with just the two of us, but we really want to bring on women and men and just have this be an open discussion about the intricacies of that dance between the masculine and the feminine.
Yeah, I was thinking let's start with our stories, I guess. Why are we doing this? Why are we so excited about this conversation?
Right. Yeah, let's keep it personal. Why why
Yeah,
why 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 are we here?
yeah. Why are you here? Want to go first?
Why am I here? Yeah, this is a rich conversation. I could do this indefinitely, and you and I, Hristiyan, we were talking about this. Um, you were telling me a little bit about some of your workshops you were doing with men, uh, teaching them or guiding them towards having more vibrant, present relationships with women, and that got me inspired. And then we started talking about, hey, why not do a podcast? And here we are. I mean, personally, having been in multiple relationships over the years, and my last one, well, one of my last ones, my marriage being a 25-year marriage, which was successful for 25 years. I have a 12-year-old daughter that came out of it, who I love immensely, and had a lot of great memories from that relationship. And yet, for whatever reason, that relationship didn't survive. It didn't make it past the 25 years, and maybe it wasn't meant to. But when I really look back at it, I see that there was a loss of polarity, that the masculine and feminine polarity that keeps that charge in relationship waned over time, and there's various reasons why. And since the end of that relationship, which was about 5 years ago now, I have been just researching it. I mean, I'm just getting on every YouTube video, every book, every podcast, asking people about this topic. How do you maintain that polarity, the attraction between the masculine and feminine, and what is masculine, what is feminine? All these just fundamental questions, and that's just been a topic that I've been fascinated with, and the opportunity to shoot the shit around it is very enticing to me, especially with you, my good friend, Hristiyan. How about you? What
Yeah.
brings you here, my man?
Well, I just wanted to comment on that because that is such a big thing. Like almost every relationship suffers this at one point or another. I mean, I would even say every relationship suffers that unless the couple, the two people in it, decide to consciously do something about it. If you're just relying on on the energy that brought you together, on that passion, that runs its course. That's not gonna last. And unless you're consciously doing something to maintain that spark, that polarity, it's gonna go away. So I think this is a very needed conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I think but there's a personal thing, and then I agree. I think this is a timely conversation for the world. I feel like I think you're right. I don't think I'm the only one who's had issues with it. Um, I think, and that's that's one of the main driving forces for me is as I get ready to be in another relationship, I want to have more skills. I want to go into it with more intention than, I don't want to bring my past patterns into this next stage of my life. So I think this both serves selfish purpose, but also I think it can help other people to have this conversation.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I can definitely relate to your experience. My story is quite fascinating. Even when I look back on it, I'm like, damn. Because I end up teaching workshops at a very young age, at like the age 25 or 26 or something like that. I was teaching workshops, and it all kind of happened to me. I wasn't looking for it. I signed up for a workshop, which was a pickup workshop, and then apparently I had some skills that I didn't know I had. Like the people there was like, you need to teach this. Like you have an impact on women that other men don't. I was like, wait, what? Up until that point, I was in 2 long-term relationships, and I didn't see my sin. I was heartbroken because one had just ended, and so I discovered that I had some natural or unconscious, or maybe picked up from my culture or my society or my parents, or I don't know where, past lives, who knows, and somehow end up teaching other men how to seduce women, how to create this spark. But then it kind of got me in trouble because I got married, not 25 years like you, but 4 years ago, and the spark definitely ended up dying in my relationship as well. And it hurts even more to look back on it and be like, I'm supposed to know this. And I do kind of know this, but kind of when you're in a marriage, it's a whole other game. It's a whole other level that I don't know. I lost my ways, and we can talk more about that. But it really pains me because like if I didn't know, or at least I knew more than what I applied or what I used, and the spark died, and now I'm facing a potential divorce. So I'm also a victim of this conversation. So I'm very much interested in this conversation based on what I've already known, but also I don't know if this makes sense, but in a sense, like I feel like I'm very much a student, and I've also been in the position of a teacher. So I'm like embodying both at the same time in a weird way. So kind of sense, I feel like I have a lot of smart things to say on the subject, but I also want to humbly say that I'm also a student,
Yeah. Yeah. My sense is that you and I are both actually pretty good at the spark side of things, like how, get that fire going with some kindling, and the what's important at the beginning of a relationship. And then, I mean, I definitely have learned a lot over the last 5 years. And I'm excited to get into relationship and start to practice some of it. And yeah, I think that this is a place that personally I definitely need to grow. Is like, what's the long term? How do you keep that fire burning after the initial kindling and the spark has kind of dissipated? And how do you keep on putting logs on the fire so it's just it's burning hot, not just in a relationship and kind of it's stagnant and you're good friends, and I want that too, but I personally want to have some fire in our relationships, in my relationship. So yeah, let's talk about it. Let's maybe talk about what's this conversation going to look like. This is our first one. It's just you and I. I personally would like to bring in women. Actually, I'd like to bring women, and men, but I'm particularly interested in women's point of view. Like what keeps that polarity alive long term? What do they want? What do they not want? And not even just women, but again, I think for masculine and feminine, we don't even have to just talk about women and men. It's just the masculine and feminine within us. I mean, there's so many different ways we can go with this conversation.
I mean, should we start with talk about how do we look at what is masculine, what is feminine? How do you see those things?
Yeah, start
just
with
to kind of put some definitions. Yeah,
definition of terms. Yeah, yeah, I think that's a good idea.
It's such a controversial subject, right? Like, again, these days it's like, God forbid, you talk about man or women, like people don't know what a man or a woman is, let alone feminine or masculine. So,
right.
Yeah, and different cultures throughout the millennia have defined them differently, but in essence, I think very similarly. So, how do you define it, or when you hear masculine, what do you hear? When you hear feminine, what do you hear?
Yeah, I mean, that's such a great question, and you're right. It is. It's controversial, right? Like, how I think some of what I say might be taken. It could be taken wrong, or but yeah, I'm just going to say what's on my mind and in my heart. I think when I think about masculine and feminine, I think about the yin and the yang. That classic symbol, that Asian symbol. That they're complementary energies, and that we all have masculine and feminine in us. And when I think about masculine, I think about kind of the yang, which is the protruding energy, the kind of getting out there in the world, maybe a little bit of risk taking, edgy, a little bit leadership, like kind of getting out there and protruding, and to kind of not hide the actual sexual connotation of it. It's like it's penetrating. I think of hunting. I think of the energy that comes with going out into the field and exploratory, and maybe a little analytical at times. And when I think of feminine, I think of more receptive, more nurturing, more internal than external, intuitive, creative, subtle, less kind of in your face, more sensitive, a little bit more refined, maybe. How about you?
Yeah, those are great. I just want to, just to put there's going to be a controversial these days, no matter what you say. But I just want to start with that there is no life without feminine and masculine. Right? Maybe at the source that we're all one, we're oneness, we all come from oneness, but there is no life without feminine and masculine. Like you need a man and a woman to create another human, right? Everywhere in nature, you need the play of those dualities to create life. So one's no better, one's no worse, one's not more or less. Like they need each other, and like so again, like, and if you look at the electricity, very very simple. Like you need a positive pole and a negative pole to create electricity. Like right now, you and I won't be able to talk without this positive and negative kind of playing with each other.
Right. It's like everywhere in the universe, negative, positive charges, right?
Yeah. So, and even if you say that is the first controversial thing that we can say, that the masculine usually is identified with the positive pole, and the feminine with a negative. But again, that it's not negative from a sense of it's negative. It's the one that's receptive, is the one that's receiving. And we could look at that from sex, the masculine, when it comes to sexually, you have a sexual organ that penetrates. The feminine has a receiving organ that gets penetrated. And then you could look at that from a larger perspective, like we call father-son. The sun is constantly on penetrating, just seeding, with its sun ray, the planet. And then we call Mother Earth. Then the Mother Earth is receiving that, every piece of life on this planet, you can say it's sunlight. But the gift of the feminine is that was able to take that sunlight and create so much life and diversity on this planet, right? So which one's better or worse, right? So it's that, the sun's penetrating, the planet is receiving it and creating life with that. So just to confirm with your ideas, with what you're proposing, that the feminine is receptive. So it plays, you can say the masculine is more logical and the feminine is more intuitive. The masculine is more external, the feminine is more internal. And again, I also want to propose that we have these qualities within ourselves. And to me, a healthy human is one that can embody both within themselves and know both parts of themselves. And I think me having a masculine body, a male body, I'm more, it's easier for me to embody masculine energy. But I have the feminine within me, and I can learn to honor that and listen to that and play with that. And I have intuition and I have internal experience and I can be sensitive and all these things. Just like a woman can be very logical and outgoing and direct and penetrative and all that. And we see that in the world.
Right. Yeah, I think that's kind of part of what I'm very much interested in exploring, is that like where we can embody a masculine and feminine within ourselves, and then how that relates to anybody in our life, actually, but specifically partners, to understand when they're embodying their masculine, and when maybe I'm embodying my feminine, maybe I'm bringing out the masculine by embodying my feminine in my partner. Which actually is what I think happened in my last my marriage, where I took on the feminine very much. So I took on the homemaker. I was at home with the kid and making sure that everything on the home front was taken care of, and my ex-wife was out bringing home the bacon, so to speak. And it was, I loved it. I mean, it was a really beautiful experience. And but me being in my feminine really forced my ex-wife to be in her masculine. And as fun or as interesting of an experiment as it was, over time it became unsustainable because, she's a woman. She actually she's a woman in particular who wants to be in her feminine. Even though at that time she actually was experimenting with being in her masculine. She was starting a business and she was really enjoying that process. And I was really enjoying being at home with my daughter and being the homemaker. But ultimately, the core of our essences as men and women, and I'm not saying that this is universal for all men and women, but for us, I think it was draining for her to be in her masculine constantly, and then for me to be in my feminine constantly. It wasn't sustainable.
And do you think that maybe, there's a lot, I'm having a lot of thoughts about this, but do you think that maybe she, when she came home, and more specifically in the bedroom, she wanted to feel feminine, even though she was masculine out in the world? And that's the place, even though throughout the day you took the feminine, if we're gonna go with that, and she took the masculine. But when it came to the bedroom, she wanted to reverse that. Would you say that?
Yeah, I would say in the bedroom I actually was fairly masculine, but I think it was just the sum total of everything. I mean, I was like I literally was taking on what's traditionally the feminine, the internal, the nurturing, even the sensitivity. I was kind of the one that was a little bit more in tune with what was going on in the community and in the family, maybe even more emotional than she was at that time. So I think that almost definitely showed up in the bedroom as well, but it just permeated the relationship. And yeah, on her side of it, she was just very, very masculine. She was, and in a way, we both kind of at least explicitly said that was okay and that's what we wanted. But I say, but it was. I mean, I think it was what we wanted for a while, but it wasn't conducive to creating the polarity, I think, in the bedroom ultimately. And I think it's very important what happens in the bedroom. So yeah, I think in the end, I think the physical attraction was what started to fade, even though it was a psychological source of the depolarization.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing that this makes me think which to me is so heartbreaking, we talk about this whole equality conversation, and I think a lot of people confuse equality with sameness. To me, we should have equal opportunities, but we're not equal. No one's equal. You and I are not equal. Two men are not equal. Two women are not equal. And that's why we have competitions, right? That's why we have Olympic Games that everyone watches to see who's the best, or no one's equal. And that's beautiful. That's if we're all equal or all the same, it will be a pretty boring world. But as women are, we have oppressed women for a very long time. I mean, just even if you look at our religion for forever, like that, like we have a god who is considered to be male, and he has a son who is also male, but there's missing a mother. Like there's no mother in the picture. So throughout the Crusades, women were considered witches and burned, and so we've suppressed the feminine, this kind of masculine culture. And now as women are having more power, we're considering powerful women, they're being very masculine. So how, as we're giving to me, that's not an empowered woman. If a woman have to contort herself, if her nature is more feminine, what is feminine power in our society? What is our world will look like if we have more femininity? Because I see a lot of women in power, but I don't see a lot of feminine energy out in the world, which I think it's much needed.
Right. There's a way in which women have risen through the ranks of the patriarchy, have learned to play the game of the patriarchy in business and in politics, and but in doing so have in some ways sacrificed their femininity. I definitely saw that in my relationship as well. That's a great question. So, my question comes to me is how can I support, again, it's like the positive and the negative, you can't, they're connected. How can I position myself in a way that is masculine, that can allow her to be in her powerful feminine? And maybe we've been just as a society going through this process to understand each other more. I mean, from my own point of view, I understand woman. In some ways, I think I understand woman better than women understand woman, because I actually got into the homemaking role as a man, so I have kind of both sides of it, and I can just see, it's like, wow, this is really freaking hard. It is hard to be the homemaker. I mean, it was beautiful, and it was amazing, and it was fun, and I was so glad I did it. And it's such a thankless position in our society. I mean, this is something that's really fascinating. I learned that homemaking, there's a woman, economist in Australia. I forget her name, but we should bring her on the show, actually. She'd be great. But she was basically saying, she was pointing out how homemakers, 24/7 job, right, when you got children especially, is not factored in the GDP of any country in the world. Whereas you got like oil spill cleanup and trash collection and, every other job you can think of is factored in the GDP, but homemaking isn't. And it's arguably one of the most important jobs on the planet. And
it is the most important job because that's.
So if you think of it as a mother, like, the feminine typically takes that role on. Women have traditionally taken on the homemaking. Like, women have literally not been valued, are still not valued. That role, that feminine, internal, nurturing role of the homemaker is not valued. So it was interesting going to parties and stuff where, you got a business idea, or you're working out, you're figuring out something out in life. The masculine, again, the penetrating energy. You got something to talk about, right? It's just like, yeah, I'm starting this business, and this is how it's going. And you start talking about homemaking. I scraped macaroni and cheese off the floor today, and I changed 3 diapers, and I went shopping. Like, it's just like, nobody cares. Nobody wants to know, and it's just so taken for granted. It's just like, well, yeah, that's what you do, and that's why I found that there's women are and that role in particular. It takes so much strength to be in that because it's thankless, and it's so not recognized, and it's taken for granted, and the amount of internal strength it takes to hold that role when it's not actually seen as valuable is enormous.
Just heartbreaking.
It is. It's heartbreaking.
Well, I'm curious. So, did you experience that side of it as well? Like, did you feel like you really felt this kind of where she wasn't grateful for your contribution, or did she feel like you weren't doing enough? Did you experience that side of it?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think it's the classic masculine feminine tension that I think is common is that the masculine energy that's going out into the world and making the money and going into business and whatever it is thinks that the feminine energy that's at home nurturing, doing the kids, is just kind of like not doing much. It's just having fun at home, eating bonbons, and socializing, and like they're not contributing as much as they are. And then the feminine energy at home thinks that the whoever's out and about in the world holding that masculine pole is just absent, like is just not participating in the home, not contributing, like is having fun, is on purpose, and they're on fire, and they're having a lot of fun with their work, whereas at home there's like they're having to self-sacrifice, and they're not being seen, and they're being taken for granted. And I think it's a classic tension in relationships, especially when children are involved.
I'm just flashing back
and they're
to
both important, right? I mean, they're both incredibly important roles, and it seems like a simple fix. It's just people appreciate each other.
I mean, you could make the argument that especially when there's women involved, when there's children involved, that the homemaker is the most important role because you're producing the next generation.
Well, no, I wouldn't say it's more important. I mean, like, you got to have a house over your head. You got to have food on the table. I mean, you need someone who's going out into the field and hunting and bringing back the resources and building things. So I think they're equally as important. And yet in our society, one of them is celebrated, which is the masculine is typically celebrated, and it's in all the topic of conversation and all the movies and all that stuff. And the feminine is just quiet. It's just in the background. It's the foundation upon which all of that is built. But like you said at the beginning, like you can't have one without the other, right? You need both.
Yeah. And we live in such a world where we don't appreciate. I mean, appreciation. Like we just need to, as we have this conversation, is to learn to appreciate our differences, learn to appreciate the feminine and the masculine. And like, I think that's like the word appreciation and gratitude. Because, I don't have children, but with my wife, we end up in the same place where she was like, oh, you're just all day talking to people and having fun. And I was like, well, you were home all day. Well, like you were just. So we both didn't appreciate each other. We didn't appreciate what we were offering to the unit, right? Like she was offering the feminine nurturing, and I took it for granted. And she took what I was doing for granted, or at least I felt that she took it for granted. Maybe she didn't, but that was my experience. And that started to kill the spark, right? Like if I came home and she was like, oh my God, thanks for being such a man, for going out there in the world and penetrating the world and, fucking the world to produce for the household. And I came home with the sense like, fuck, like, thank you, you for making a house into a home and being so fucking awesome. And like, in a way that feeds, like I can feed her feminine, she can feed my masculine. We can love and support and appreciate these qualities within ourselves. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that right there, I'm really excited to get into the neurochemistry of polarity, because that is such a fascinating topic. John Gray, who wrote the classic book
Men Are From Mars,
Women from Venus. He's written a bunch of books since, and he talks a lot about testosterone and estrogen, and there's so many. There's oxytocin, there's dopamine, there's serotonin, all of this stuff. Like the neurochemistry of relating is fascinating, and I'm really looking forward to getting into that. And to your point, I thought about it because this idea of appreciation, what I've learned over the years is that a simple comment or a lack of a comment can change a man's testosterone or a woman's estrogen. Right? Like when a woman doesn't feel appreciated, her estrogen drops. And apparently, from what I understand, like a man needs to have more, like 10 times more estrogen, more testosterone than a woman, and a woman needs to have 10 times more estrogen than a man. That's polarity, like from a very chemical point of view.
Wow.
And then and simple things, very simple things can change that chemistry like in an instant. Like for example, like when a woman criticizes a man in a way that's not constructive, like where a man doesn't have, just basically is just criticizing him and bringing him down without actually giving him an opportunity to rectify whatever the criticism is addressing, that will immediately drop testosterone in that man. And the same thing with a woman. Like if a woman doesn't feel appreciated, or she does something and then the man doesn't actually notice it, her estrogen will drop. And then all of a sudden you've got this, this polarity that's charged. You've killed it. So and it's like these simple little things that happen daily that I'm super interested in learning more about and exploring. Like, okay, how do we build this into our relationships as rituals and habits? That word cohabitation. Like if we're going to be living with these people, as a man with a woman and a woman with a man, we cohabitate. Like breaking down that word, what are the cohabits that we're doing together to maintain the charge.
Wow. So first of all, I didn't know that about the chemistry. So I'm still processing all that. My mind's blown a little bit. But I'm flashing through all the times where I was criticized, and I could feel literally my energy. Like I come home, let's say, and then I'm met with what I experienced as this criticism. I just start to feel, if let's say I feel like a man, I'm here, like I got this. To be like, and I start to feel small, and I start to feel small, like, oh, and I don't have access to all my tools, if you will, like all the things I know to do, I don't know how to respond. All of a sudden, I don't have access to my, creativity. Or all of a sudden I feel like dumbfounded. I don't know what to say. I don't know how to react. And I just want to run away. Like, I'm just like, I can't handle this. I'm going to go for a walk or something. And it makes sense because chemically that's what's happening in my body. Like, my testosterone is just fucking dropping down. And I'm like, fuck, I'm totally lost now. And I can imagine that I've done the same to her, right? Like when I come home and I didn't acknowledge her, appreciate her, love her, cherish her in the ways that she needed to. Or I'm killing her estrogen at the same time. And women have a different reaction. I think women don't become small. They almost like become very fiery. So they start like throwing daggers at you. And then that maybe even kills it even more, where now I feel even more small. So yeah, fascinating to think that that's actually connected to my chemistry, which makes a lot of sense. Well, what about food? Because our food today, especially all this processed food, it's full of estrogen. Because most is even single men, whatever, like our diet and our food is just so full of estrogen.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things. I mean, that's one of the things I've really been investigating since my divorce, because I mean, there's nothing that'll kill testosterone more than a woman deciding that she doesn't want to be in a relationship with you anymore. And then what's interesting is like the chemistry of high. So your testosterone goes down, your estrogen goes up relatively. And at that point, high estrogen is associated with depression in men. So actually, I was depressed for years, and I had my hormones tested, and sure enough, like I had high estrogen, and so I just started getting really curious about how do you increase testosterone, and yeah, food, even your shampoo. There's certain chemicals in shampoos and various cleaning agents that are very similar to estrogen. Soy products have an estrogen-like compound in them, like tofu and soy milk. Sugar, actually, a lot of carbohydrates can have marijuana. I found can increase estrogen or decrease testosterone. Yeah, there's so many different factors. And then, of course, how your exercise, like, are you getting out? Are you exercising? Different types of exercise. Apparently, like running is like a more sustained exercise that can actually increase estrogen, whereas more kind of burst workouts, like with lifting weights or doing sprints or other types of exercises that aren't that long-term kind of grind, apparently are better for testosterone production. Cold showers. I mean, this is, it'd be interesting if we have, I think it'd be interesting for us to put up a website where as we start to learn this stuff, we actually start to document it on the website. For example, like foods that increase testosterone, foods that increase estrogen. One of the things I learned recently is that there's a substance called DIM, It's the acronym for it. It's a long chemical name, but it's in cruciferous vegetables. So cauliflower and broccoli and kale and stuff like that. And that chemical actually inhibits an enzyme that turns testosterone into estrogen. So I've been taking this and then, of course, doing all these other things that we mentioned. And now my testosterone is back to normal and I'm out of my depression. And it's just, I feel like a completely different person.
Wow. Thank you for sharing. I'm learning so much. I mean, just to think about, I love that what you're saying about exercise, that even the feminine and masculine it's present there, right? Like the way you exercise builds. If we take that the estrogen is the feminine hormone, or the representation of how it shows up in the body, and testosterone is the masculine. So if there's a certain way you exercise, you're becoming more feminine or becoming more masculine. If we play with these hormones. So just going back to this, shows up everywhere, and it's so interesting to know that, and to even what you're saying, that being depressed as a man is because your estrogen's too high.
And then cardiovascular disease, you're at risk for heart disease, which is one of those. I think heart disease is the number one killer of men in this country. I mean, it's most likely related.
Yeah. So there's this. Yeah. I mean, and then we could go into a little bit of conspiracy theories, but it just feels like we live in a world where, intentionally or not intentionally, maybe just for marketing purposes or for whatever, that for making more sales, they're trying to kill men as men, that we've always known what a man is, and they're trying to build these women into men for some reason. So it's
right. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't know if that's intentional or not, but I definitely feel like our society in general has tried to kind of merge the masculine with the feminine in many different ways in our movies, and or even in relationship. I think that's one of the biggest mistakes I have made. I think a lot of men make, is they try and be the man that they think the woman wants you to be. Right? We try and we look to women to be like, so what? How do you want me to be? You want me to be like super sensitive? And a lot of women will say, I want you to be vulnerable. I want you to really be emotional and share with me. And I found that actually, at least with a lot of women, they actually don't want that. Even the women who actually say they want that. I think a certain amount of vulnerability, yes, and a certain amount of, sharing their emotions. But for the most part, when you drop into that feminine side, it's feminine when you're feeling vulnerable and emotional and all that stuff, then that actually puts them and forces them to get into their masculine, which again, I think is okay. This is, again, just my opinion, for periods of time, but ultimately, I think the woman wants to feel the masculine as a rock, as solid and not feminine. But I think again, there's more subtleties there. I think actually it's probably very sexy and very masculine for a man with a man who is in touch with their feminine and can play with it and knows when to turn it on and when to turn it off. So I don't want to just.
Well, let me
here.
propose a different aspect on that, and you tell me what you think about that.
Sure, yeah.
So to me, if a man can hold his vulnerability, where if I can share my vulnerability, but I'm not collapsed in it, I'm not like, oh man, just I don't know what to do with my life. I'm just lost and I'm sad and I'm just
own it.
And I'm just collapsed in it. I'm helpless. Versus fuck, I just feel so lost right now. I don't know what to do with my life. I feel like there's a deeper calling for me right now, and it feels like right there, and I want to find it, and it just feels terrifying. But I'm just like, I'm not asking you to save me. I'm not asking you to help me. I'm not asking it. I'm not making it your problem. I'm just owning it for myself, and I think that's kind of, so if you want to say that's like a masculine, and I could be crying, but I'm not crying in a way that's like, oh, but I'm like, tears are coming down, but I'm in it, and I don't need you to do anything about it because I got it handled, and I'm facing my fear around it, and I'm willing to go towards that fear. So to me, that's kind of like a masculine representation of vulnerability.
Right. Yeah. Even the way you were like, I could feel the energy between those two states that you're describing. I was like, oh yeah, there's a way of being masculine in vulnerable, like a vulnerable masculine. And I think there's a way of being like collapsing into kind of a vulnerable feminine. Yeah. Yeah. It's so subtle. I mean, it's tricky stuff. I feel like it's such a dance.
Yeah, I think this is where we get in trouble with feminine masculine conversations because, people say masculine is power, feminine is love, these things. And the way I'd like to think of it, it's there's a feminine power, there's a masculine power. There's a feminine love, there's a masculine love. There's a feminine way to be vulnerable, there's a masculine way to be vulnerable. There's there's all these qualities they're not inherently feminine, masculine, but they can each one of them, like exercise, right? You could say, some people could say, well, exercise is masculine, right? And no, there's a feminine way to exercise and a masculine way to exercise. There's foods that are masculine, foods that are feminine. Like, so that's the conversation. Very interesting, and that will take away this whole, because that's part of the problem is this women, as they're stepping into their power these days, they're stepping into masculine power, and to me it's, people are like, well, we want to see a woman president. I'm like, well, that doesn't change anything. The fact that what she has between her legs doesn't make her less evil or less masculine or less patriotic or not patriotic, but patriarchy like. One of David Data, he likes to use this example a lot. He's like, think about Hillary and Bill Clinton, right? Like, who is the feminine in that relationship? Who is the masculine in that relationship? Like, it's obvious that Bill is way more feminine and Hillary is way more masculine. It's just look at them, the way they even are in their own bodies. Like, Bill is like relaxed and like kind of fun, always has a little bit of a smile. And he's plays his saxophone, like he's more feminine, and Hillary is very rigid and very like, very masculine. So in a way you can say, if you have Hillary as a president, the way she's more masculine than Bill. So so to me, it's how do we have more feminine culture, which I think we very much need, and know how to have more women that are just better, just they're just being same story, just different things between their legs. It's, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, like, how do men and women collaborate towards that?
Yeah,
that ideal. I mean, I think that's the big question. And then the other question I have is, how long do we want to do these podcasts for? The thought I had was like maybe 50 minutes. Does that seem like a
it says
good
here
number to shoot for, which is about where we're at?
Yeah, about where we're at. Yeah. I mean, we can end it here. There's a lot of topics that we opened up that we can go deeper into.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to it. And maybe we'll bring a guest on our next one.
Yeah.
All right, brother. That was fun.
Yeah, that was fun. Yeah, that was great for our first time. Well, I guess thank you everyone that has listened all the way to the end, and look forward to more. Bye.